Hi everybody, my name is Tim Bradrick and this is my demonstration of my Cocos 2DX game for my Full Sail University class, Emerging Technologies for Mobile Games. This is the game that I developed for weeks 3 and 4. Let me get started in the simulator. This is my game right here. I had some very significant technical problems. I was not able to take the game from Xcode and put it into either an Android device or an iOS device. So the only place that I am able to demonstrate this is on the simulator, and I was not able to uh, demonstrate the accelerometer or the multiplayer features, which I had hoped to present in this game. So just be aware of that. I will have another video for the accelerometer. All right, let's take a look at the game. It's called Crash Flyer, and we have some pictures that I provided. We have a background and an airplane sitting on the ground there, and I basically provided some instructions and some credits. And you will hear that when you get back to the home screen, there is an animation and a sound effect. We'll see the airplane taxiing onto the screen there, and then that animation stops, and then the sound effect will stop eventually too. Let me go ahead and get started on the play game. Now, when we start the game, it's assuming single player, and because I cannot use the accelerometer, I put in some touch controls, and that's what I had to have down here. I'm going to show the touch controls, and in the single player game, you have an ability to crash 10 times before you lose, and I'm just going to get started and show you how it runs. It's actually rather difficult using the on-screen touch controls because the airplanes crash all the time. I'm going to fail on purpose. Okay, and that's just to show the loss conditions. And then I'm going to exit out and start up another game with multiplayer. Now, in the multiplayer version, I had hoped to show more details, but I had some very significant technical problems, and I spent a lot of time trying to solve a problem that I've been told that is not solvable. Basically, there was a problem between Eclipse and Cocos communicating with each other in the different versions of them, and apparently that's not working. So I just have a pseudo multiplayer setting on this game so far, and I'm just going to click multiplayer right now. You notice another airplane shows up. That my hope was to have that be the second airplane that the other person was controlling. Now in this version, I'm going to try to win it, and you notice as soon as I clicked on multiplayer, the crashes went away. In multiplayer version, the crashes are not going to be recorded, and this time I'm going to attempt to win it and try to do it quickly. So we'll give this a try. Again, it's kind of challenging with the controls here. Now I should show the controls here. And we'll go ahead and get started. And we'll see how we can do. We basically just have to wait for... That was the other airplane crashing. We have to wait for the finish line to show up. And there we go. So that wasn't too bad. The finish line showed up eventually after about 15 seconds. And the first player to touch the finish line wins the game. And that's the extent of the game. Okay, in this section of the video, I'm going to talk about the code. And I worked on the code inside of Xcode provided by Apple, and we'll see what we can do here. Um, there are several scenes that I have that I worked on. There are 4 scenes. 2 of them are very brief and straightforward. I had the credits scene. See if we can switch over there. And this is in C++, and basically all of the scenes inside of Cocos and Xcode are set up with create a scene, initialize it, and that is basically the 2 methods that are available inside of all of these scenes. So I'm just going to demonstrate it here in credits first. The initialize is just setting up the base values here. I have the background sound, or the background image rather. It creates a sprite for the image and loads that from the resources file, which is over here. So, and it just goes into that folder and looks for the file named that and displays it. And next I have the title, and that is created with a CC label. And then there are the list of credits. All the credits go to the people that provided the sound effects, and I found all of them free online. They're either public domain or provided free for use. And then next, created the menu items, and there were 3 menu items that I provide. I'm sorry, this is the credit screen, so there's actually just 1 menu item, and that's the exit. And then these items set it up in a certain position with a certain font. This is a method that I learned how to do using the Sonar Systems Cocos tutorials on YouTube, and that's what I used there. And then this adds it as a child in the scene layer, and then it calls back the go back function, which is down here, and that loads up the home screen again. And then I'm just going to jump over to the help screen, which is very similar. It's just the text is a little bit differently or presented differently, but all the basic features are there as well. We have the background instead of we have a different title instead, and so forth. But basically, it's all the same. Now we're going to jump over into the home scene. There's a few little differences, but not a lot. The main menu is a bit longer. Again, the background scene, the title, just the title of the game, Crash Flyer. The menu has 3 items on it: play game, instructions, and credits, and each of those call a function. And then this sets up the actual menu. There is a sound effect that's playing, and this right here calls the sound effect. It loads it first, and then it plays it. And then it loads up the sprites for the animation. There's a big blue airplane picture that I drew, and that loads it. It adds it as a child in the screen. I rotated a tiny little bit to make it look like it's sitting on the ground. Then I animate it, and this is how I animated it with the move by function, and it moves it over the course of 15 seconds into a position that's it starts at 1.5 times out, and then it moves inside into the scene. I did set up the accelerometer, although I cannot demonstrate it. I did put the code in there to hopefully have it work correctly. And this is the section where I set up the listener, where I display the information, where I grab the data and then add that into a function down here. Anytime that the accelerometer changes its value, it displays it, and then it adds these as children into the layer. And then the functions that will move into the different scenes. Okay, now we're going to move on to the game scene, which is the meat of the project. Again, we have the create scene, the init, plus there's quite a few more that I created down here below, which I'll go through and demonstrate what I did with them. Let's see here. I just basically set up some variables, loaded the background picture. It's the same for all of the scenes. The menu is what appears across the bottom, so I set it up a little bit differently. Change controls from touch and tilt. That calls this function, and it just switches between touch and tilt. Multiplayer, if I was able to get that working completely, that's where I would have put that, and then exit to go back into the home screen. And then the font size and the positions in the main menu that shows up across the bottom. You may have noticed right at the very beginning there's this huge begin button. This code sets that up. It is a menu of one item, and it's a very big menu item, font size 148, and that basically calls the start game function. And I'll down here, the start game function. Let's see if we can find that real quick. Start game functions. Well, first thing it does is it immediately removes that menu, and then it goes down and it starts the finish line. It moves the finish line very far to the right, and then over the course of 15 seconds, it moves it to about 3/4 of the way in on the screen. You notice that the planes were moving across the screen. This places the airplanes. It's an array of objects, and it iterates over this array, and it places the planes to the right of the edge of the screen, and then applies an action to them. And these two items here selects the position of where it's going. They're started on the right, they're going to finish on the left. This is selecting a position at random on the left side, and it's using the rand function, and it applies those position X, position Y, randomly selected items onto an action to move to that position on the left side of the screen, and then over the course of a random number of seconds, it moves there, and then it applies that action to the airplanes. And then the start function also schedules the update function, which is down here, which I'll demonstrate here in a moment, and starts listening and watching the activities that are happening on the screen. Okay, and then we're going to go back up and look at the main init function again. This is where we left off, where we were looking at the finish line moving in. Let's see here, a little bit further up, the begin button, and then there are some touch controls that I set up. Each of them is just an arrow. I have a original picture that is an arrow pointing up, and then I take that picture and rotate it and have it point left, right, and down as well. And there is the function to rotate the pictures, and then it adds each of those as a child in the scene. So there's 4 different add childs. And then I toggle the visibility of the touch controls. It starts out assuming that the all right, continuing on with the code demonstration, the program assumes that we're starting with tilt controls, and then it uses the choose controls function to turn off the touch controls. Continuing on, this sets up the finishing line. Again, it's far off to the right, and then in the start function, it starts it moving. The next section creates the arrays that I use for the various planes. There is a set of player planes and opponent planes, and then in the section down below, I determine whether they get collided, and if they collide, there's something that happens to them, and I'll explain that later. Here it creates the actual planes themselves. First off, it creates the first player plane, which is the red one. So it grabs an image from the resources and continues on and adds that as an object in the array as well as the layer. It sets up next the opponent planes. It starts out with 3 opponents, and that can be easily adjusted. And each opponent plane is a picture of the blue plane, and it sets them up just shy of the right edge, 10 pixels in. You may have noticed that there's 3 little dots or cones at the very edge of the picture. It just shows where they start. That doesn't matter a whole lot. It just puts them on the screen and puts them in the game space. First off, and it's the start button, or the start begin button and function, which places them. Next in the code is the touch listener. This sets up the event handler for the touches, and there is a section down below that detects where the user touched. Again, on this section, there's also the accelerometer, and I set up the event handler for the accelerometer. I play a different background music here, and then there's also a crashing sound, of course, that you may have heard in the game demonstration. That's this, and then there is a display for the crash counter. The next section adds that. And then that's the end of the init function. When the player clicks on the begin button, the start game function is initialized, and that's what I demonstrated earlier. It starts the finish line moving and all the players, or I'm sorry, all of the opponents moving. And then it schedules the update function, and that's what this is down here. The update function is the biggest part of the game, and let's see, at the beginning of it, it just sets up some basic values. The game winner, player 0 or player 1, could be the first or second player, could be the winner of the game. At the beginning of the game, neither of them are winners, so I set it at -1. And then I set a plane speed as a default speed for the airplanes, and that's based off of the width of the screen. And then next we have a 2 very large loops. They are iterating through these arrays. One is the player plane arrays, and then inside of that there is another one for the opponents. Let me explain what's going on for the players first. First off, it constructs a rectangle. Based on the size of the image, but a little bit smaller than the image size. So it takes the position and subtracts the width of the image, and then it's a little bit smaller so that you can get close scrapes between the images, but it's just a little bit smaller, just so it's not quite as difficult. And in the image itself, there's some empty space, so it eliminates some of that empty space by making it just a tiny bit smaller. And then it will use this rectangle in the collision detection. Next, there is a gravity effect where the planes drift downwards, and that just moves it down a small amount each frame. And then the next section is where it attempts to detect the collision between them. First thing it does is it attempts to detect a collision with the finish line. And if it detects a collision with the finish line, a notice is given. If the, depending on what plane is collided with the finish line, it gets the index of that plane. And if it's index 0, it's the red player, so there's a red player notice. If it's player 1, it's the gray player, and a gray player 1 notice is there. And then it moves the finish line off of the screen. Next, it starts an array iteration to detect the opponent planes. Actually, no, that's further down. This section here takes off all of the opponent planes, and it removes them and sets them off far to the far up and to the right. So it removes them from the scene, basically. And then it posts the win notice on the screen. Now, currently still going in with the update with the players. If the players drift off the edge of the screen, this section will put them back into the scene. So if the position of the player is less than the size of the distance of the picture, the plane image from the distance of the edge, it pushes it back into the scene. And this does it for each of the directions. This is if it's if the position is lower, so if it's below or above, and then I'm sorry, to the left and to the right, and then above and below. And then here we go. Here are the opponent planes, and this is where it detects the collisions. It sets up another rectangle for the opponent planes. Again, just a little bit smaller, but they are in different directions, so I swapped some of these values based on the other ones for the players. And then down here, sometimes I assigned random flight paths for the opponent planes, and sometimes they drift off of the up above or down below, and I push them back in with this section here. And again, it compares the position with the size of the airplane image, which is right here, and the edge of the screen. And it pushes it back inside of the screen if they get too far. This section is for above, and this section here, if they go off the left side of the screen, it restarts them again on the right side with another random path. This time they move a little bit faster after the first pass through the game. The values that I assigned here are a little bit smaller than what I did up at the other section here. And then finally, for each opponent plane, it checks for a collision. And if there is a collision, it puts it into one of these arrays. And basically, let's see here. If there is a collision, if they intersect, if their corresponding rectangles intersect, it checks whether it's multiplayer or not. If it is multiplayer, it does not keep track of the number of crashes. If it is not multiplayer, it keeps track and updates the number of crashes you have remaining. And then if you fall below the number of crashes you're allowed, it announces a fail situation right there, and it sets up that notice right here. And then finally down here, it compares each of the opponent planes and puts a notice on who won or who lost if it is a multiplayer game. Okay. Down here, we had placed the crashing planes into the array. Let's see where we did that. Here we did. Here, right here, we put the crashing planes into the array, and then down here, it takes those arrays and iterates through them. So even if both players crash or if multiple opponent planes crash, it can keep track of all of them. Here it handles the players crashing. It gets the plane that crashed and then plays the crash sound effect, stops all the animations for that player, and then it moves the player back 250 pixels. And then the opponent plane is all of their actions are also stopped, and then it sets its position far to the left of the screen so that the update function on its next iteration can pick it up and assign it a new path. Okay, and then the rest of the functions here are basically similar to what I had in other ones. We had the go back function. Let's see, the touches and so forth. And I'll go through these other items here. Again, I had anticipated providing some multiplayer. I did provide a little bit of multiplayer. This is where I set up the gray airplane in the scene and remove the crash counter, because in multiplayer the crashes are not counted. I also had set up the accelerator. Again, the accelerator should actually work, but though I had no means of testing it or demonstrating it with Cocos. I demonstrated the accelerator with another program. And let's see here. This is where I grabbed the information from the accelerator. This is where it grabs it. And then it applies it as like the touch screen functions. It compares to see if they're off the edge. If they're not off the edge, they move them a certain distance up or down. Again, the accelerator would be positive or negative, so it moves it up or down, or left and right, as the case may be. And then further on down, we're choosing the controls. The controls are just turned on and off visibly. And then down here, this is where the touch handler is taken care of. It gets the position of the actual touch, which is input there. And then it's compared with the positions of the sprites. The up sprite, if it's within the bounding box of that sprite, it moves the airplane up. So the Y value it moves it forward a tiny little bit, but it moves it up much more significantly. And similar for the down, the left, and the right. Okay, and for this last section, I have a reflection that I will, okay, and the reflection questions. Did the material you learned meet your expectations for this class? I think the material was good material. I don't think the Cocos documentation was as thorough or as good as the other assignments that we had worked on this month. I found it a little bit frustrating. There were different versions on it. I was using version 3. Most of the tutorials were using version 2 and so forth, so I got a lot of depreciation errors. Do you think the topic we covered this week will be useful in the future? Absolutely. Which framework or engine do you plan to use? Unity. I was very frustrated with Cocos.